First, the defendant is present with his lawyers, the people's counsel are present. And Mr. Bevel has resumed the witness stand. I'll remind you that you're under oath. You may continue your examination, Mr. Milius.
Thank you, Your Honor. When we left off, you had testified that you were able to determine the position of the head, the source of the blood, based on important stains in 2 and 9 showing vertical travel. I want to go back and get a little more detail about the actual stains. I want to show you what we previously marked as People's 184, page 143. It's stain number 3. You recognize this?
Yes, sir, I do.
And what is this?
This is a primarily circular stain. Circular tends to mean that it's going straight into whatever the surface is, in this case vertical. It would also be circular if it was going straight down, just simply due to gravity.
And so you're saying if it's against a wall and it's circular, it's straight into the wall, it tends to show that?
That's what it suggests. Again, we have to be careful. The smaller the stains become, the less likely they are to identify direction of travel. We also have to be careful with the substrate. The more coarse that the substrate may be, the harder it is to identify direction of travel. There are a number of variables that has to be considered, but looking at this, it appears to be a 90 degrees straight out from the wall.
So that the source of the blood would be 90 degrees straight out from almost completely circular spatter.
Yes.
How many of the spatters had these characteristics where there was no identifiable direction of travel that could be discerned from their shape?
Well, the majority of the stains, with the exception of 2 and 9.
So is that 20 of the 22 looked similar to number 3?
Which one?
Number 3 in front of us with no direction of travel.
That you can identify, no, sir.
Okay. And just to clarify, because I got a little confusing there, of the 22 stains total, 20 of them, are you saying, looked similar to number 3 in that they had no direction of travel that you can discern from its shape?
That's correct.
Meaning, as you testified earlier, that it was indicative or suggestive that it went straight into the wall.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to draw your attention to, and you already testified about this, is stain number 2, and then we'll go on to stain number 9. If we could put up People's Exhibit 184, it's already up there, page 142. Okay.
Yes, sir.
This is one of the ones you had testified earlier as to showing an indication of travel. Can you walk us through that?
Yes. In looking at the stain, it is more rounded on the bottom, and there's a little bit of blood that is traveling upward on the top, creating a point going upward, showing us that the direction of travel, instead of going down, is actually rising.
And if we could go back real quickly, and just to get context as to where it is relative to everything else, if we go back to, I believe it is 184, 138. Just to give us the overall pattern. Do you see stain number 2 there?
Yes, sir, I do, at the very top.
And can you point to it with the stick that you had? The pointer? Sorry,
Yes.
the pointer. It's all the same. Okay. And you also, if we could go on to stain number 9, which is same People's Exhibit 184, page 149. This was the, This was the other one that you mentioned earlier in your testimony as having an indication of a direction of travel. Can you walk us through that on 9? Stain
Yes,
number
sir.
9.
We don't have an area on either end that is forming any additional displacement of blood that would show a direction of travel. It is either going upward or it is traveling downward. But we're still able to look at the long axis of the elongation and get an approximate area that it would be coming from.
And if we could go back to the main board to give a sense of context to where number 9 is.
Yes, sir, it's right here.
And is that almost directly below number 2?
It is to the left of number 2, but they are in agreement relative to the approximate long axis of the elongation.
Now, when you looked at the total stains, so there were only 2 that showed a direction of travel, I think you testified to, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
2 and 9.
Yes, sir.
Did you see any indication in the stains of any direction of travel that was not vertical up and down, but rather right to left?
I don't see any stains that are showing a dramatic left or right angle.
Why is that important?
It is important from the standpoint that if we run the line down the long axis of the stain, if the stain was pointing in the direction that my left hand is currently, the long axis would lead us back this direction. If it's the other direction, the long axis would lead us the opposite way. When it is basically vertical, the long axis is leading us downward towards the floor, or in the one case, we can't identify whether it's up or down. It's still within that long axis in a vertical sense.
And that lack of a left-right directionality, is that important for showing where the source of the blood was?
It is.
And again, your conclusion based on this pattern, the lack of left-right directionality, and the 2 that have up and down directionality, what is your conclusion?
That somewhere between 2 and 9, that general area, if we draw a circle around where those lines are coming to, would be a general area that would be consistent with where the blood source was when those stains were created with a gunshot hitting the wall.
How far away can spatter go based on a gunshot?
Okay. On misting size stains, which are below 1 millimeter in diameter, traveling through air, the air overcomes the actual velocity, and they will travel at maximum approximately 4 feet. Now, if you have a larger blood stain that's got enough mass, it can travel a little bit further.
Looking at the physical evidence in this case, how far away was the source, Morris's head, from that wall?
Approximately 18 inches out from the wall or less. Obviously, it can't be less to the extent of being against the wall. So 18 or less inches out from the wall, and then approximately on the floor or slightly above the floor, and in the area of the 2 elongated stains, 2 and 9, coming down towards the floor.
Good. Based on the evidence that you've reviewed, could Durst have been lying between Morris and the wall at the time of the shooting?
No.
Based on the evidence that you've seen, could Durst be laying on the ground on the opposite side of Morris at the time of the shooting?
With where I am placing the head based upon those 2 elongated stains, he would have had to have been coming around the corner of the wall in order to get a shot, which would also block the area where his arm or gun is from the edge of the left door frame, which is the area where reportedly he's laying on the ground.
We're going to go a little more detail into what you just described there. Let me ask one last question in this little area. Is the evidence consistent with Durst standing above Morris while Morris is laying on the ground and firing the weapon?
That is certainly consistent as a viable possibility, yes, sir.
Okay. I'm going to show you a freeze frame from the defense animation. May it be marked, Your Honor, as People's 258.
Is that right? Yes.
Do you recognize this?
I do.
And is this from the animation that was presented to you?
Yes, sir.
258. Is this animation, this freeze frame of the animation, consistent with the evidence at the crime scene?
In my opinion, no.
And just to be clear, you're saying that this animation is not an accurate recreation of the crime scene?
That is correct.
Why?
A number of reasons. And may I stand with the pointer?
Yes.
We can see the entry to the left side of the nose as we see blood on the side of the nose. That in essence is blocking where the nose is, this blood from going in an upward and rightward direction. We can see that there's a number of blood stains that should be on the inside of the door facing wall, and there's none. That forces the issue that this blood source has to go to the right, otherwise we would have stains within that area.
I'm going to show you another exhibit, and may we mark it as People's 259, and this will be do you recognize this?
Yes, sir.
And did you create this?
I did.
You got, when I say create this, you created the overlay, the graphic, the yellow, the green, the red, on top of the defense animation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you walk us through what this exhibit that you created is showing? And it starts off with a freeze frame, the same freeze frame we had in 258, I assume.
That's correct. We have, again, blood that is being shown traveling to the inside facing of the door frame. And in the red, I'm showing an approximate, and you always have to be careful because I can't show an exact size of cone, but a cone area that you would expect the blood to be traveling to. The dotted line that is in yellow is below the 2 and 9 stains that are elongated, and then the green lines are showing an approximate cone shape that would be produced from that location. And this is, in my opinion, the area where the blood source, if it is a gunshot into the head would have had to have been. Approximately 18 inches out from the wall and against the floor, slightly above the floor. And that,
he was pointing to the yellow circle.
yes, sir. And that would, by doing this, it eliminates the blood that from this should be on the inside of the door facing, and certainly would be consistent with the upward traveling number 2 and number 9 elongation blood stain.
To put a finer point on it, are you saying that the animation as it exists is not an accurate representation?
In my opinion, based upon those factors, yes, sir.
And are you also saying that the animation, the additional yellow circle with the green angling is how where the head of Morris should be, based upon the evidence that's found on the board?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, I want you to consider the animation, the crime scene spatter that you see on the board. Would you expect to have, on the wall, would you expect to have spatter on the gun?
Yes, sir, and what you look for first for a clue is there spatter on surrounding surfaces. If the gun is outside the range of about 4 feet, I would not. If it is closer, then yes, I would expect it to have blood on it. And in fact, the animation shows blood going onto the gun.
So your conclusion and the animation as it actually shows it shows that there actually would be spatter on the gun.
It does, yes.
Now, looking at the crime scene, looking at the animation, and looking at the fact that the gun was recovered, but there was no blood spatter recovered on the gun. What does that tell you?
There are a number of viable possibilities. If that is the weapon, it was outside the range of the blood spatter.
Let me stop you a second. If that was the weapon, was outside the range of the blood spatter, would that also tell you that this animation is incorrect?
Is an expert may be led, overruled.
In the manner in which it is portrayed here, yes, there should be blood on the gun, the weapon.
Is another possibility that the gun actually was just wiped down when it was recovered and therefore spatter was not found?
Yes, that is certainly a possibility that blood could be removed if it is cleaned.
Did you review the testimony of Durst from the 2003 trial?
I did, yes, sir.
And I'd like to put up actually courts 13. It's LADA bait stamp 116227 to LADA 116228. You familiar with this testimony from Mr. Durst?
I am, yes, sir.
And essentially, did he state that he did not clean the gun?
That's correct.
So based on the physical evidence, the animation, and Mr. Durst's testimony, what conclusions can you draw?
That if the weapon is within closer than 4 feet, I would expect there to be blood based upon the fact that we have back spatter. And the statement that it was not cleaned, that would place the gun outside of the 4 foot approximate range.
So those two things can't be true, is that correct? That the animation cannot be correct, and also Mr. Durst's testimony that the gun was not cleaned. Can those both be true based upon that animation?
No.
Did you testify before Durst testified?
I did not.
You did not testify before Durst?
I did not.
No, at the 2003 trial in Galveston, you testified before Durst testified.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Okay. And was Durst present in court and had the opportunity to hear you testify when you testified.
Yes, sir.
But did you testify about the defense animation?
Didn't even know it existed at that time.
So what did you, was there any way of knowing the importance of the, from your testimony about whether or not there was spatter on the gun?
No, sir.
Now, is the physical evidence, the blood spatter, the recovery of the gun without spatter, consistent with Durst standing above Morris Black while Morris Black is laying on the ground and shooting into his head?
It cannot be eliminated and certainly consistent with that.
And the animation that you saw, that you've been presented by the defense, is inconsistent with both the testimony of Mr. Durst and with the physical evidence. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
At this time, I'd like to put up courts, a section of courts 14, LADA Bates stamp 1122069, line 18 to page 122070, line 5. And I'm going to read it briefly for you. Question, you are familiar with the term blowback? Answer, and just for clarity, you recognize this testimony as that of Max Courtney, is that correct?
I do, yes, sir.
Question, are you familiar with the term blowback? Answer.
Yes, sir, I am.
Well, I'm going to read that thing, sorry.
Okay.
Question, are you familiar with the term blowback? Answer, yes, sir. Question, blowback is the blood that gets blown back into the barrel of a gun on a close shooting. Answer, well, blowback is blood that gets blown backwards. It sometimes does get blown back into the muscle. Yes, sir. Question, gets blown back onto the gun, correct? Answer, sometimes. Question, and that happens if the gun is within about 12 or less or 6 inches of the target. Answer, it certainly can. Question, you're likely to find blowback on a gun, aren't you? Answer, you may find it. Yes, sir. This testimony of Max Courtney, is this, as a general rule, if you were lecturing on a course about blood spatter, is this testimony correct?
Yes, I would disagree with the distance slightly. It's more likely to be within either contact or 4 inches for it to be inside the barrel.
But as it pertains to this case, the facts that we have in this case, is this statement correct?
Considering blowback as well as back spatter, yes.
When you look at the physical evidence, I'm asking you in the sense, is this consistent with the animation?
No,
in
sir.
the lack of any back spatter on the gun?
On the gun, it would be inconsistent.
Right. So essentially what you're testifying to, that as a general rule, yes, this is true, but given the facts that are shown in the physical evidence, the animation, you actually would have back spatter on that gun.
I would certainly look for it and expect it to be there.
Good. I'm going to move to Courts 14 to a separate part of Max Courtney's testimony. It's for counsel, it's at LADA 122071, line 24 to 122072, the next page, line 12. I'm sorry, my vision is not great, so I just got to make sure we got this right one up there. You read Max Courtney's testimony. Is this what you recall from his testimony?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm going to read it briefly, and then I'm going to ask you about it. Question. Now, blowback. The state asked you about blowback, and I think your answer was you may find blowback. What are the things that dictate whether you may find blowback on a gun? That is blood that comes back from the person that's been shot with a gun. Answer. When you have back spatter, because you don't always have it, how far away the gun is what might be blocking the gun. That is, and over the gun, all the sorts of things which control whether or not you're actually going to get back spatter onto the gun itself. and of course, the possibility that it gets there and it's removed also. Question, and even under the most ideal conditions, you always get backspatter, what is called blowback on a gun? Answer, no, sir. Same question I asked you on the last one. If you're given a lecture on backspatter, not considering the facts in this case, just a general lecture on all types of backspatter, would this statement be true?
You have to understand and relate it to, is it germane to this case? I would say it is not, but if you forget this case and talk about in generalities, yes, I agree with what he's saying.
And just to parse some of the things, he talks about how far away a gun is. So if I were shooting at you, I have a gun this far away, we're half the courtroom away from each other, and I shoot at you, would you expect to have backspatter on the gun?
No.
Okay. One of the things he talks about is what might be blocking the gun. I forget the name of the South African athlete with the prosthetic legs. Do you remember the athlete I'm talking about?
I'm aware of the case you're referring, yes, sir.
And just for the jury, that's the case where he was accused of shooting into a bathroom through a door and killing his girlfriend or wife, I don't remember which. In that case, he was on the opposite side of a door than the victim, so there was something in between them. In that type of case, would you expect backspatter?
No.
Okay. And let's say someone wrapped the gun, maybe they're trying to conceal the gun or something, and wrapped it with cloth or reduce the sound. Would you expect backspatter on the outside of the wrapping, like maybe cloth was around it?
Again, in this case specific, if it was wrapped.
I'm giving you as a general rule.
Okay. If there is something that is blocking the blood from getting on the gun, I would not anticipate there would be any blood on the gun.
Okay, so Mr. Lewin reminds me the name of the South African athlete with the prosthetics is Oscar Pistorius. I probably misspelled his name, and I apologize to the court reporter because I cannot spell his name.
Maybe Mr. Lewin
I'm sure you could Google it.
Phonetic Pistorius, I believe.
Well, on the sheet,
We got it.
on Google, P-I-S-T, now I lost it, O-R-I-U-S, I believe is the correct spelling.
Okay, so going back though on this particular case, on the animation that you saw in this case, if you were asked about this animation as a possibility and considering the physical evidence, do you agree with that statement as it applies to this case? Do you agree with Max Courtney's statement?
Talking about backspatter.
Yeah, that sometimes you would have it.
Well, the best indication as to whether or not you have it is whether or not it's there on the surrounding surfaces. If it's on the surrounding surfaces from a gunshot, if the gun is within range, I would anticipate that we will have blood also on the gun.
And in this case, would the gun be in range? In the animation, the defense
As
animation?
the animation shows, it would.
Okay, I'd like to show another section of Max Courtney's testimony. It is for court and counsel, LADA Bait Stamp 122038, lines 13 through 22. And I'm going to read it for you, and then I'm going to ask you some questions about it. Question, let me show you, Mr. Courtney, defendants exhibits 67 and 68, a computerized animation of two people on the floor in a reconstruction of or a model of the apartment. Does a gunshot that's depicted in defendants exhibit 67 and the placement of the person who in the position of Morris Black and the person in the position of Bob Durst, is that consistent with what's depicted in defendants exhibit 68, the pattern of blood spatter on the wall? Answer by Max Courtney, yes, sir, that would be a possibility. Do you agree with that statement?
No, I do not.
And why?
In the animation where the deceased is located and where Mr. Durst is located and the gun is shown, we can see in the own animation that blood should be on that side of the door frame, and the only way that it cannot be there with this animation is to move the head to the right, where blood would be missing the side.
Did you have the opportunity to go over not just the freeze frame, but the entire animation?
Yes, sir.
And based on your background, training, experience, did you notice anything that you thought was inconsistent with your experiences about the animation?
Yes, sir.
Can you please tell us?
Yes. In the testimony by Mr. Durst, he is in essence coming towards the deceased Mr. Black. Mr. Black, in essence, according to the statement, is rising upward. Between those two, with two individuals that are approximately the same size, the body momentum coming forward with a person who is not going the opposite way but just simply rising should put that struggle the opposite direction, somewhere by the table, as opposed to getting up and having the ability to overcome the person who's coming towards me. I would expect that we would find the individuals in the shooting somewhere by the table or this side of the wall where the blood is found.
And did you observe any inconsistencies between the defense animation and Durst Galveston testimony?
Yes, I did.
And what were they?
One was the hand was placed over the barrel. Mr. Durst's hand is placed over the barrel, and in other places it's the barrel and Mr. Black's hand, but it's coming from above. If we look at the animation, the hand of Mr. Durst is first holding the arm of Mr. Black, and then it slides down to where it's holding the gun underneath, as opposed to what he is testifying above.
Sorry, Your Honor, 1 second. I'm going to play for you the defense animation. Just want to confirm the number. It is 258. No, I apologize. It is 199A. And if we can play that for...
Play it now?
Yes. And again, you described it as the momentum in your experience, you would expect them to be carried not into the kitchen, but out into the area with the bed. Is that correct?
That is what I would expect, given the statement given.
In this case, obviously there were pieces of evidence that had been removed from the scene. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In other cases that you've, in your experience in Reconstructionist, have you had cases where evidence has been removed from the scene and it's evident that there was an attempt to destroy the crime scene, so to speak?
I have, yes.
Would you expect that if there was a gunshot in a wall, that would be consistent with someone trying to cover up evidence of a crime? If there, sorry, if there was,
Rephrase your question.
yeah, I'll rephrase it. If there was evidence of a gunshot into a wall and it was patched, would that be consistent with somebody trying to hide evidence of a crime or evidence in the crime?
Beyond his expertise?
Sorry.
Well, it's common sense, I suppose, but overall,
Speculation.
You may cross-examine on the point. Overruled.
With a gunshot, if there's no way of identifying, number one, when it occurred, and also whether or not it is from the actual gun that is in question, if it is not associated with evidence that it occurred during this crime, the other possibilities are that there's been a shooting at some other time, could have been during a struggle, could be a number of different possibilities.
Mr. Bevel,
If somebody actually did purposefully shoot it to try and redirect the investigation or the incident that has occurred, I've certainly known of incidents where that has happened, but you need supporting information to be able to identify that.
what other things would have, let me withdraw that question. Would having had the body left in the position where Morris was shot have aided in the reconstruction of the crime scene?
No, without question.
Would having had the head aided in reconstruction of the crime scene?
Yes.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
You may cross-examine.
Hello again, Mr. Bevel.
Hello, sir.
We met 20 years ago.
Yes, sir.
Do you know everyone in Texas in the South is beginning? No, everybody in Texas knows him. Thank you for taking up for me. I know he's got my back. Let me see. Is it true that the first time you saw the defense animation was in the year 2016?
That I recall, yes, sir.
And when you saw the defense animation, did you tell Mr. Lewin that the animation shows a version that could, in fact, create the spatter on the wall?
That
Did you
was
say
based
that?
upon the animation that I first had, which was not nearly as clear as the subsequent one. But yes, that can produce spatter on the wall.
The spatter on the wall. Did you say the animation shows a version that could, in fact, create the spatter on the wall?
Again, from the animation that I had, which was very blurry, yes. With the second full edited one, I would disagree with that.
So, let's look at your email to Mr. Lewin, dated October 16th, 2016. May I have an exhibit number, please? Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. And B, what was your last mark? B3?
So E,
So E?
E,
Yes,
E
sir.
for email.
Thank you.
on the screen.
At this point, it's
Show
fine.
it to the.
It should not be up on the screen.
Yeah,
It's not
display to council first. You may confer.
I need to address the court.
Okay, sidebar. It's be a minute. You can stand and stretch.
Mr. Bevel, Defendant's Exhibit E is an email from you to John Lewin dated October 16th, 2016, in which you say, I was never able to open the animation in Dropbox, so went to the web for Dan Rather on DG and was able to view it. The animation shows a version that could, in fact, create the spatter on the wall. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
Then that's what you said.
Based upon the video I was able to download, I still agree with it.
Okay, so you do agree that the animation shows a version that could have created the spatter that you found on the wall.
Which version are we referring to?
And, well, there's only one version.
Well, no, sir. The version I had was very blurry in that area.
Well, let's look at this again. Do you say anything about it being blurry?
I do not, but based upon what I saw, I'm agreeing that the spatter could get there. When we look at the video that is much better quality, it's showing blood going to the inside of the door frame and on the gun.
Well, let's look at that again. Do you say anything in your email about the animation being blurry?
In the email, I do not.
Okay. Now, let's look at another exhibit. This exhibit, which I think has been up in front of you in several different versions, basically shows all of your blood spatters that you found on the wall. It's a kind of an overlay, right?
And I'm sorry, Your Honor, this is 254D.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry. yes.
Those are your numbers and your blood spatters overlaid on this screenshot from the animation, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, you spoke earlier in your testimony about the pattern of blood spatter, didn't you?
I did.
And the pattern means you take all of the blood spatter and see if it describes a pattern, right?
Yes, sir.
Maybe there's blockage and you see that blockage, but there's no blockage. There was no blockage that you saw, right?
Correct.
And it describes kind of an oval, doesn't it?
Somewhat, yes.
Now, the blood spatter from a bullet hitting, let's say in this case, the face of a person, or really any blood spatter, it goes out in a conical fashion.
Yes, sir. In an ideal situation, it does.
Of course, and I'm going to do this kind of old-fashioned way. We used to have flip charts in court that you've been around long enough to know what a flip chart is, don't you?
Yes, sir.
Where you can actually go up to a chart and draw on it. Now, a cone pardon my artistic ability or lack of it, is kind of like that, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Now, if you transect a cone perpendicular to the cone, like that, the pattern that you would see would be a circle, wouldn't it?
A circle with that, putting that line in?
No. That cone of blood is going to hit something if there's something in front of it.
Yes, sir.
And if whatever it hits is perpendicular to the cone, then it's going to describe a circle, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
That's
Again,
just plain geometry.
Well, there are a number of variables here that would alter that, but yes, it is certainly under ideal lab conditions. That is exactly what I would expect.
In high school, plain geometry teaches you that, doesn't it? Just
Well, it doesn't
transect
teach.
a cone, you get a circle.
Yes,
But if you transect the cone at an angle, the pattern that you would see would be an oval, right?
again, if the surface it's landing upon is at a correct angle, yes, sir.
So now let's go back to the diagram, which incorporates your blood spatter findings. It's an oval, isn't it?
Yes, sir. With being 32 by 19, that would create an oval.
And so, using as an example the animation, the cone that comes out with the blood spatter from the head would not be perpendicular, or excuse me, the wall would not be perpendicular to the cone, would it? In
Would
this
not.
example,
Would not be perpendicular to the cone.
it would be at an angle from the cone.
Yes,
So the pattern that you would expect from the blood spatter would be an oval.
The
Right.
farther out that you get, I'm sorry, I'm referring to individual stains, you're referring to the overall
Pattern.
pattern. I agree, yes, sir.
Okay. Now, you didn't observe Mr. Durst when he testified in Galveston, did you?
No, sir.
What you did at some later time, and you tell us how much later it was you reviewed the transcript.
I believe it was in approximately 2016.
Okay, so 16, well, that'd be 14 years later, you observed or read the transcript.
Yes, sir.
Black and white,
Yes, sir.
no pictures.
Correct.
And you're somewhat experienced at reviewing testimony, aren't you?
Yes, sir.
You know that when in a transcript, as opposed to actually watching the witness testify, in a transcript, often a witness will say, well, this happened over there, or it happened over here, or my hand was here, or he was there. You know, understand what I'm saying?
I do.
And because there's no picture associated with the there or here, it's impossible to know exactly where the person was talking about, isn't it?
You would have to have some context.
Do you recall in Mr. Durst's testimony from Galveston how he described that Morris Black had tripped over the chair
I do.
and that as they fell and hit the floor, the gun went off?
Yes, I recall that.
Now, you supplied some pictures of your own to the prosecution showing Mr. Durst's hand underneath the gun, right?
Underneath.
Well, let me put it this way. You did not see the demonstration that the jury in Galveston saw of Mr. Durst and myself showing what happened, did you?
I did not.
All you had was the black and white description that was on the transcript and not the actual movements that we did.
I did not see that, no, sir.
I want to show you something. I want to use the actual gun.
Mr. DeGuerin, I think you're going to spend more than 1 minute with this gun. Therefore, I think we should take our break now so that we're not late for lunch. So, ladies and gentlemen, do not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case. We'll return at 1:30.